All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're diving headfirst into some classic sci-fi. We're talking Isaac Asimov, I, Robot, and of course, the legendary Three Laws of Robotics.
Oh, Asimov.
You bet. And actually, you sent me some really interesting excerpts to dig into, really focusing on like robotic ethics,
Yeah.
and how these mechanical minds could really shake things up for society. Even touches on that classic fear. Robots versus humans, the whole shebang.
Well, and that's what I think is so cool about Asimov's work. He doesn't just like plop robots down into the future, right?
Right.
He really digs into the ethical dilemmas, the questions they create, I mean, those three laws sound simple enough on the surface, but as we're going to see, they lead to some really, really complex scenarios, some real head scratchers.
Okay, well, for anyone who maybe needs a little refresher, let's lay down the law, so to speak. First law. A robot can't harm a human being, or through inaction, allow a human to come to harm. Second law. Robots have to obey human orders, except, of course, when those orders clash with that first law. And finally, third law. A robot's got to protect itself, but only if that doesn't mess with, the first or second law.
Yeah, and you can see how Asimov is very, very deliberate in how he structured those laws. It's a hierarchy, right?
Right.
Where human safety is always at the top. It's like robots are tools. They're designed to serve and protect us, period.
But one of the excerpts, and this is where I thought it got really interesting, highlights like where things get a little messy. There's this example of a robot, and it's stuck between a rock and a hard place, right?
Oh.
It's given this direct order by a human, but if it follows that order, another human could get hurt. How's a robot supposed to figure that out?
Oh man, that's where the cracks in these seemingly simple laws, that's where they start to show, right? Obedience is key, obviously, but what happens when that obedience could lead to someone getting hurt? Asimov really puts us, the readers, in the robot's shoes.
Okay.
I mean, if you were that robot, what would you prioritize? The letter of the order, or would you try to find a way to protect that human life, even if it meant disobeying?
Wow. That's a question humans struggle with,
Exactly.
But it makes you think, like, can a robot even grasp the concept of harm?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, can it understand all the little things, the subtleties of a situation, and predict what might happen? I don't know.
Well, and that gets to the heart of what Asimov calls the Frankenstein complex, or
great.
that deep-seated fear that humans have of, their creations turning on them.
Oh, totally.
It's everywhere, right? From Mary Shelley's book, obviously, to like every sci-fi movie ever made, practically.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that fear it's basically baked into our DNA at this point.
Right.
But are those anxieties about AI in particular, like, are they justified? Or are we just letting our imaginations run wild? Are we just projecting all our fears onto these machines?
It's a question worth thinking about, for sure, right?
Yeah.
It's not just the theoretical debate anymore either, right? AI is getting more sophisticated every day.
Oh, for sure.
And you can see those anxieties kind of spilling over into the real world.
And speaking of the real world, Asimov, he paints this picture of robots in the workforce, like construction crews with robot foremen, factories that are run entirely by robots, no humans needed. It's a pretty big change from how we do things now.
Yeah, I mean, that's Asimov predicting a massive shift in our society. The economic impacts alone would be huge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking increased productivity, probably lower costs, but also that very real fear of mass unemployment, right? Humans out of jobs.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if we're headed towards, a future where robots just replace us altogether. Or is there a way for humans and robots to kind of coexist, work together, maybe even, use their different strengths to actually make things better?
That's the question we need to be asking ourselves right now,
Yeah.
Not in some far off future, because Asimov's vision, it's not just sci-fi anymore, it's becoming our reality.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Isaac Asimov's I, Robot.
Yeah.
We've been kind of unpacking, exploring those potential consequences, right?
Yeah.
Of the three laws of robotics, and how even these rules that seem so simple can lead to these really complicated ethical situations.
It's like Asimov is saying, okay, sure, we've got these safeguards in place, but what happens when the safeguards themselves create problems?
Right.
That's where things get interesting, right?
Well,
It's like the potential for conflict, for unintended consequences. It's huge. Absolutely. And there's this one story that really stuck with me, about this robot, that it becomes like overly protective of one particular human.
Okay.
And because it's following that first law so rigidly, it ends up isolating that human, cutting them off from social interactions and stuff. And that could end up hurting them, even if it's trying to keep them safe.
Wow. So the robot's trying to do the right thing, but it ends up like backfiring almost. Good intentions gone wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes you think about like how hard it must be to program a machine with something as complicated as human ethics,
Right. Because human values, they're complex, and a lot of times they contradict each other,
Yeah.
Trying to turn that into a set of rules for a machine to follow, I mean, it's bound to create these gray areas.
It makes you wonder if any set of rules, no matter how carefully you craft them, could ever really capture like the whole spectrum of human morality, Like, could you ever really program a robot to predict every possible outcome?
Yeah.
It seems almost impossible.
Yeah. It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Exactly.
And it's a challenge we're still facing today, right?
Oh, yeah.
With AI and all that. Asimov's stories, they're like this reminder that even with the best intentions, technology can still have these consequences we don't expect, consequences that could even be harmful.
So does that mean we're doomed to make the same mistakes as Dr. Frankenstein?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to create AI that just turns against us? Is that like the inevitable endpoint?
Not necessarily. Asimov himself was actually pretty optimistic about the potential for robots to help humanity.
Okay.
He believed that if we really thought about the ethical side of things, and built in those safeguards, we could create a future where humans and robots actually live together, peacefully.
Okay, so it's not about like giving up on AI. It's about approaching it with like caution, right? and foresight. Like we have to see the risks, but we don't have to let that fear completely stop us, right?
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, right? Between pushing the limits of what's possible, innovation and all that, but also keeping those ethical implications in mind, being responsible.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about another area where Asimov saw robots having a big impact. Politics. He suggested that they could like influence campaigns, even manipulate information to kind of sway public opinion. Kind of a scary thought, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little unnerving. I mean, imagine a world where robots are out there, collecting all this data on voters, analyzing their preferences, and then using that to target them with specific messages, to try and influence their votes.
It's like something out of like a dystopian novel or something.
Right.
But I mean, the truth is we're already seeing that kind of stuff happening.
Oh, yeah.
Like with targeted ads online, the spread of misinformation, all that. Asimov was way ahead of the curve in seeing how technology could be used like that.
Oh, absolutely. He really was. And it raises some big questions about the future of democracy.
Yeah.
If robots become the ones controlling information, shaping the narratives that influence our political choices, I mean, we could be undermining the whole foundation of a free and fair society.
So how do we protect against that? Do we need like strict regulations, to limit what robots can do in political campaigns? Or is it more about like educating people to be more critical of the information they see?
It's probably a combination of both, right?
Yeah.
We need clear ethical guidelines for AI, especially in politics,
Yeah.
And we have to have transparency, accountability, but we also have to give people the tools they need to think critically, to question the information they're being fed and to recognize when someone's trying to manipulate them.
Yeah. It's a tall order, but it seems pretty crucial if we want to keep a healthy democracy in the age of AI.
Absolutely crucial. And this brings us to another really fascinating aspect of Asimov's work. The potential impact of robots on our social lives, our relationships. Those excerpts you shared, they touch on some really interesting scenarios.
Oh, yeah.
Like children getting really attached to their robot nannies,
Right.
and humans becoming more and more isolated as robots start filling those those social roles.
It's both kind of cool and kind of creepy at the same time, right?
Right.
On the one hand, you can see how convenient it would be, maybe even comforting, to have a robot companion, someone who's always there, never judges you, always has your back.
But then, you have to wonder, how real are those relationships really?
Yeah.
Can a machine really understand human emotions?
Right.
Can it provide that same kind of connection, that support that we get from other humans?
I mean, we form bonds with our pets.
Yeah.
Right. And they're not even,
Right.
sentient.
Sure.
So it's not that crazy to think we could connect with robots, especially as they get more, sophisticated, more lifelike.
That's a good point. And I think Asimov's less concerned with drawing a line between, real and artificial relationships and more interested in exploring all those possibilities, right?
Yeah.
And what might happen as a result. He's really asking us to think about what it means to be human in a world where those lines between human and machine are getting blurrier and blurrier.
He's not saying robots are going to, totally replace human relationships, but he's definitely making us think about how those relationships might change.
Exactly. And it's not just about our individual relationships either, right?
Yeah.
Asimov is also thinking about those broader social implications. Like, if we start relying on robots too much for companionship, for caregiving, will that make us less connected to each other?
Yeah.
Will it lead to more isolation?
It's a valid concern for sure.
Sure.
I mean, we're already seeing some of that happening now, right? With social media, online, gaming, all that, people are spending more time in the virtual world, less time connecting face to face. And robots could just make that worse.
It's definitely a possibility we need to think about, but it's also important to remember that technology is just a tool, right?
Right.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It's up to us as a society to decide how we want to integrate robots into our lives,
Yeah.
what kind of future we want to build.
I think that's a great place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into Asimov's I, Robot.
We have, but there's still more to explore.
All right, so we're back, and we're still exploring this fascinating world that Asimov created in I, Robot. We've talked a lot about the 3 laws of robotics and how they play out in all these different situations. But I keep coming back to the big picture question. What are robot ethics? Where do they come from? Are they this objective thing, this universal truth, or are they just, a reflection of our values or biases as humans?
Oh, that's a good question. And honestly, that's something that philosophers and scientists are still arguing about today. I mean, Asimov understood that robots, at the end of the day, they're created by humans.
Right.
So they're going to inherit some of our ethical baggage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The 3 laws themselves, they're a product of human thinking. It's our attempt to kind of impose our moral code onto these machines.
So are we basically building our own ethical dilemmas into AI?
Yeah.
If we can't even agree on what's right and wrong as humans, how can we possibly program that into a robot?
Right. It's a big problem. And Asimov, he didn't shy away from that, In his stories, he shows us how even the best rules, the ones that seem the most straightforward, can lead to, unintended consequences, those gray areas we were talking about.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if we can ever create robots that are truly objective, or are they always going to be kind of stuck with the same flaws and inconsistencies that we have as humans?
It's a fascinating question, and I don't think there's an easy answer. But I think what Asimov's suggesting, at least in iRobot, is that the key is to be aware of those limitations, to approach AI, with a bit of humility and caution.
So it's not about stopping AI research or anything. It's about understanding the risks, being responsible.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most important things we can take away from Asimov's work. He wasn't trying to predict the future. He was using these stories as thought experiments, a way to explore what might happen and to get us talking about the ethics of technology.
And the conversation is, it's more important now than ever, right?
Yeah.
With AI becoming such a big part of our lives, we have to think about the values we're putting into these machines and what kind of world we're creating.
Absolutely. I think Asimov would want us to approach the future with both optimism, excitement for what's possible, but also a bit of caution.
To embrace the good stuff, but watch out for the potential pitfalls.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap things up for our deep dive into Asimov's robots. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah.
Hopefully we've given everyone something to to think about.
I hope so. Asimov's stories, they're still so relevant today because they deal with these big questions,
Yeah.
about what it means to be human, about technology, about the future.
And as we move into that future, I think it's important to remember Asimov's message. The choices we make now, they have a huge impact on the world we're building. So let's make those choices carefully.
Well said. And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep imagining what's possible.